The restaurant buzzed with Friday evening energy as our group gathered around the table. I'd been looking forward to this dinner all week, a chance to relax with friends after another exhausting stretch at work. The conversation flowed easily between bites of appetizers and sips of wine, topics ranging from office gossip to weekend plans to dreams we'd been nurturing. That's when I made the mistake of mentioning my winter vacation idea. "I've been thinking about taking a ski trip," I said casually, swirling my glass. "Maybe Aspen or somewhere in Colorado. I've always wanted to learn to ski properly." The table went quiet for just a moment before my friend Tasha's laugh cut through the air. It wasn't a kind laugh, more like the sound someone makes when they've heard something ridiculous. "Aspen? Really, Mia?" Her voice carried that particular tone of condescension I'd learned to recognize over our 5-year friendship. "I don't know how you could afford that, given your budget. Those mountain resorts are incredibly expensive. Maybe start with something more realistic?" Heat flooded my cheeks as the other friends around the table shifted uncomfortably. A few looked at their plates, while others suddenly found their phones fascinating. Nobody defended me. Nobody suggested that maybe I'd been saving or planning carefully. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but Tasha's words echoed in my head for the rest of the evening. The assumption behind her comment stung worse than the words themselves. She decided, apparently, that my financial situation was so precarious that dreaming about a ski vacation was laughable. The truth was more complicated. I worked as a graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm, earning a decent salary that covered my bills and allowed for modest savings. I wasn't wealthy by any means, but I wasn't destitute either. I just lived quietly, preferring home-cooked meals over expensive restaurants and thrift store finds over designer labels. Tasha, on the other hand, worked in finance and made significantly more money. She never missed an opportunity to mention her salary, her investment portfolio, or her expensive purchases. I'd always assumed she was just proud of her success, but tonight's comment revealed something uglier. She genuinely believed I was beneath her financially, incapable of achieving the same experiences she took for granted. That night, lying in bed and staring at my ceiling, I made a decision. I was going to Aspen. Not to prove anything to Tasha, I told myself, but to prove something to myself. I'd show myself that dreams weren't reserved for people in certain income brackets. The next morning, I opened my laptop with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Research became my obsession. I spent hours comparing ski resorts, reading reviews, and most importantly, hunting for deals that would make this trip possible without destroying my savings. Aspen had a reputation for being one of the most expensive ski destinations in America, frequented by celebrities and wealthy tourists. But I discovered that timing mattered enormously. If I traveled in early December, before the peak Christmas rush, prices dropped significantly. I found a package deal that included a modest hotel room, lift passes, and equipment rental for considerably less than I'd expected. It was still a stretch, requiring careful planning and sacrifice, but it was achievable. I created a spreadsheet tracking every expense: flights, accommodation, equipment, meals, and a buffer for unexpected costs. The total came to approximately $3,000, a significant amount but manageable if I committed to my plan. Over the next 4 months, I became obsessed with saving. I packed lunches instead of buying them, canceled subscriptions I rarely used, and picked up freelance design projects on weekends. Every dollar saved went directly into my Aspen fund, a separate savings account I opened specifically for this purpose. The hardest part wasn't the saving itself, but keeping my plan secret. Tasha and I saw each other regularly, and she continued making subtle comments about money and lifestyle differences. Each remark strengthened my resolve. "Must be nice not having expensive tastes," she said once while shopping. "I wish I could be satisfied with basics like you are." I smiled and said nothing, but internally I was counting down the days until my trip. By October, I'd saved enough to book everything. The moment I clicked purchase on the flight and hotel package, my hands trembled with excitement and nerves. This was really happening. I was going to Aspen. The confirmation emails arrived, and I printed them out, keeping them in a folder I looked at whenever doubt crept in. When Tasha invited me to her birthday dinner in November, I almost mentioned the trip, but stopped myself at the last second. The surprise would be sweeter if nobody knew. I bought ski gear at end-of-season sales, finding quality items at reasonable prices. My apartment slowly filled with equipment: waterproof jacket, thermal layers, gloves, goggles. Each purchase made the trip feel more real, transforming it from abstract dream to concrete plan. December arrived with the first real cold snap of winter, and suddenly my departure date was just days away. I'd requested the time off work months earlier, citing personal travel, without elaborating. My boss approved it easily, and my coworkers assumed I'd be visiting family. Tasha called the week before I left, suggesting we grab coffee. "You've been so distant lately," she complained. "Everything okay?" "Just busy with work," I lied smoothly. "You know how year-end projects get." She launched into a story about her upcoming holiday plans, a 2-week Caribbean cruise her parents had paid for as an early Christmas gift. The casual way she discussed 5-figure vacations reminded me exactly why I'd kept my own trip secret. She'd either try to join and take over the planning, or worse, find subtle ways to diminish my achievement. The night before my departure, I barely slept. My packed suitcase sat by the door, a physical reminder that this was actually happening. At 4 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee, watching the dark streets outside my window and feeling a mixture of excitement and disbelief. By 6 a.m., I was in an Uber heading to the airport, my heart racing with anticipation. This was it. My dream was becoming reality. The flight to Colorado was smooth, but I barely noticed. I spent the entire time staring out the window as we crossed the country, watching the landscape transform from flat plains to dramatic mountain ranges. When we began our descent into Aspen, I pressed my face against the window like a child, taking in the snow-covered peaks and valleys. The airport was small and charming, nothing like the massive hubs I was used to. Within 30 minutes of landing, I was in a shuttle heading toward the resort town, watching the scenery become increasingly spectacular with every mile. Aspen itself took my breath away. The town looked like something from a postcard, with its Victorian-era buildings, snow-dusted streets, and the magnificent mountains looming overhead. People walked around in expensive ski gear, and luxury cars lined the streets, but I refused to feel intimidated. I belonged here just as much as anyone else. Check-in at the hotel was smooth, and my room was modest but comfortable, with a window offering a partial mountain view. I stood at that window for several minutes, just breathing and absorbing the reality that I'd made this happen through determination and careful planning. That evening, I bundled up and walked through town, taking in the atmosphere. Restaurants glowed with warm light, and laughter spilled onto the streets. I felt simultaneously anonymous and completely present, exactly where I was supposed to be. My first morning on the slopes was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd signed up for a beginner ski lesson, joining a group of similarly inexperienced adults learning to navigate the bunny hill. Our instructor was patient and encouraging, teaching us basic techniques while we repeatedly fell in the snow. By lunch, my legs were burning and I'd fallen at least 20 times, but I was actually skiing. Nothing fancy, just cautious movements down gentle slopes, but it felt like an enormous achievement. The mountain air was crisp and clean, and the views were absolutely stunning. Every time I stopped to rest, I took photos, wanting to capture not just the scenery but the feeling of being here, of having made this happen. In the afternoon, I ventured onto slightly more challenging terrain, my confidence growing with each successful run. Other skiers passed me effortlessly, their movements fluid and graceful, but I didn't feel inferior. Everyone had to start somewhere, and I was starting right now. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a cozy restaurant I'd researched beforehand, finding a place that offered excellent food at reasonable prices. The meal was delicious, and sitting by the fireplace with a glass of wine, I felt profoundly content. This trip wasn't about proving anything to Tasha anymore. It was about proving something to myself. By day 3, I'd improved enough to handle the easier green runs without constant falls. The sense of accomplishment was intoxicating, each successful descent building my confidence. I'd also discovered the joy of the mountain lodge, where skiers gathered between runs to warm up and share stories. Strangers struck up conversations easily, bonded by the shared experience of conquering the slopes. I met a woman named Clarissa who'd been skiing for 20 years. When I mentioned it was my first trip, she offered tips and encouragement that helped me improve my technique. Later, she invited me to join her group for an afternoon run, and I spent several hours skiing with people who welcomed me without judgment or questions about my background. These interactions reminded me that the world was bigger than Tasha's narrow perspective. The photos I took that day captured not just beautiful scenery but genuine smiles, moments of triumph, and the pure joy of being fully present in an experience I'd worked hard to achieve. That evening, scrolling through the images on my phone, I decided it was time to share them. Not to brag, but to celebrate. I selected my favorite photos. Me on the slopes with mountains in the background, a shot of the stunning sunset over the peaks, and a picture of the gourmet hot chocolate I'd enjoyed at the lodge. I posted the photos on social media with a simple caption, "Living my best life in Aspen." Sometimes dreams require planning and patience, but they're worth every bit of effort. The response was immediate. Friends I hadn't heard from in months commented with congratulations and heart emojis. Former coworkers expressed surprise and admiration. My parents called, proud, and a bit shocked that I'd planned this trip so quietly. But the message I was really waiting for came 3 hours later, a text from Tasha. "You're in Aspen? How is this possible? I thought you said you couldn't afford expensive vacations." I stared at the message, noting that she'd misremembered our conversation. I'd never said I couldn't afford it. She'd simply assumed and stated it as fact. I took my time crafting a response, wanting to be honest without being cruel. "I never said I couldn't afford it. You assumed that. I've been saving and planning this trip since July. Turns out, with research and budgeting, a lot of things are possible." Her response came quickly. "But Aspen is so expensive. How did you manage it?" I explained briefly about timing, package deals, and careful financial planning. I didn't mention the 4 months of packed lunches and freelance work, the sacrifices that had made this possible. Those details were mine to keep. Tasha's messages continued throughout the evening, a mixture of questions, confusion, and what I recognized as guilt. She asked about every aspect of the trip, where I was staying, how much I'd spent, how I'd found deals. Her interrogation revealed more about her assumptions than any direct conversation ever had. She genuinely believed I lived paycheck to paycheck, unable to save or plan for anything beyond immediate needs. The realization stung, even from 3 states away. This was someone I'd considered a close friend for 5 years, yet she'd never really seen or understood me. The next morning, as I prepared for another day on the slopes, Tasha called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mia, I need to apologize," she started without preamble. Her voice sounded strained, uncomfortable. "I was wrong to say what I said at dinner, about you not being able to afford this. I had no right to make assumptions about your financial situation." I remained silent, letting her continue. "The truth is, I think I was jealous. You've always seemed so content with less, and that threatened me somehow. Like maybe all the money I spend isn't as important as I've convinced myself it is." The admission surprised me. I'd expected defensiveness or excuses, not this moment of vulnerability and self-awareness. Tasha's apology continued, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back for months. "Seeing your photos made me realize how wrong I've been. Not just about this trip, but about our friendship. I've been condescending and judgmental, and you didn't deserve that." I found myself softening despite the hurt her previous comments had caused. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "It did hurt when you dismissed my dreams so casually, but I appreciate the apology." We talked for another 20 minutes, a more honest conversation than we'd had in years. Tasha admitted she'd been measuring herself against others constantly, using money as a way to feel superior and secure. My quiet contentment had threatened that framework, forcing her to question whether her approach to life was actually making her happy. "You seem genuinely joyful in those photos," she said. "Not just happy to be somewhere expensive, but truly present and alive." I can't remember the last time I felt that way on a vacation. I'm usually too busy making sure everyone knows where I am and what I'm doing. The conversation left me thoughtful. Tasha's behavior hadn't just been about me. It had been about her own insecurities and the pressure she felt to constantly prove her worth through material success. Understanding that didn't erase the hurt, but it provided context. After hanging up with Tasha, I took a long walk through Aspen, processing everything. Our friendship had been built on an uneven foundation, with her assuming a position of superiority and me quietly accepting it to keep the peace. But something had shifted fundamentally. I no longer felt the need to minimize my achievements or dreams to make her comfortable. This trip had given me more than just skiing experience and beautiful memories. It had given me clarity about my own worth and the courage to expect more from my relationships. I deserved friends who celebrated my successes rather than questioning whether I was capable of achieving them. The remaining days in Aspen passed in a blur of skiing, exploring, and quiet contentment. I improved steadily on the slopes, eventually managing some blue runs that would have terrified me on day one. More importantly, I allowed myself to fully experience and enjoy every moment without the weight of others' expectations or judgments. On my final evening, I sat in a coffee shop watching snow fall outside the window, sipping hot chocolate and journaling about the trip. I wrote about the skiing, yes, but also about the deeper lessons. About believing in myself. About the power of quiet determination. About choosing friends who lifted rather than limited. Returning home felt strange, like I was a slightly different person than the one who'd left a week earlier. My apartment looked the same, but I saw it through new eyes. The modest furnishings and simple decor no longer felt like evidence of financial limitation, but like intentional choices that allowed me to prioritize experiences over possessions. Tasha reached out several times over the following weeks, and I noticed a genuine shift in how she communicated. She asked questions about my life with real interest rather than as preludes to her own stories. She stopped making comments about money and lifestyle differences. The change wasn't perfect or complete, but it was noticeable. Our friendship didn't immediately return to its previous closeness, though. Something had been broken by her initial comments and revealed by my trip. I found myself more cautious about sharing dreams and plans, protecting them from potential dismissal. But I also found myself more confident in pursuing those dreams regardless of whether anyone else believed in them. Work colleagues noticed the change in me too. I spoke up more in meetings, contributed ideas more freely, and generally carried myself with increased confidence. My boss even commented on it during a one-on-one meeting. Whatever you did on that vacation, it clearly recharged you. You seem more self-assured. 3 months after my Aspen trip, Tasha invited me to lunch. She'd been different since my return, more thoughtful and less performative about her lifestyle. Over salads at a casual restaurant, she surprised me by sharing plans of her own. "I've been thinking about your trip," she said. "About how you made it happen through planning and determination. It made me realize I've been coasting, relying on my salary to fund experiences without really appreciating them." She explained that she'd started budgeting for the first time, not because she needed to financially, but because she wanted to be more intentional about her choices. She'd also begun planning a trip that focused on experience rather than luxury, a hiking expedition in Peru. "I want to feel what you felt in those photos," she admitted. "That genuine joy and accomplishment. I don't think I've ever really worked toward something just because I wanted it, without considering how it would look to others." I found myself genuinely happy for her, recognizing that my trip had inadvertently inspired her own journey of self-discovery. Our friendship was evolving into something more authentic, built on mutual respect rather than assumed hierarchy. We talked about dreams and goals with an honesty we'd never achieved before. Tasha shared insecurities about whether she was truly happy or just going through motions, while I opened up about my own doubts and aspirations. The shift in our friendship's dynamic was noticeable to our mutual friends. At group dinners, Tasha no longer dominated conversations with stories designed to impress. She listened more, asked better questions, and seemed genuinely interested in others' lives beyond surface-level details. One evening, she publicly acknowledged her past behavior. "I "Oh, Mia, an apology that the whole group should hear," she announced suddenly. A few months ago, I dismissed her dream of going to Aspen, implying she couldn't afford it. I was wrong, condescending, and a terrible friend. Mia not only went to Aspen but did it through smart planning and determination. She taught me that assumptions about others reveal more about ourselves than them. The group fell silent, clearly uncomfortable but also moved by her honesty. I appreciated the gesture, even though the public nature of it made me slightly uncomfortable. That same evening, another friend named Brianna approached me privately. "Your trip inspired me too," she admitted. "I've been putting off applying for graduate school because I assumed I couldn't afford it. But watching you make your dream happen made me realize I should at least try. I submitted my applications last week." Her words hit me unexpectedly hard. I'd changed my own life with that trip, but apparently I'd also influenced others simply by pursuing what I wanted and sharing the result. At work, the confidence I'd gained from the Aspen experience continued manifesting in unexpected ways. I volunteered to lead a major client presentation, something I would have avoided before. The presentation went brilliantly, earning praise from both the client and my supervisors. 2 weeks later, my boss called me into her office with surprising news. "We've been impressed by your initiative and the quality of your work lately," she said. "We're creating a senior designer position, and we'd like to offer it to you. It comes with a significant raise and more creative control." The promotion felt like validation that my personal growth was translating into professional success. The raise, ironically, would make future trips even easier to plan. I accepted immediately, feeling grateful and proud. When I shared the news with friends, Tasha was among the first to congratulate me. "You've been killing it lately," she said genuinely. "That trip really was transformative for you, wasn't it?" I nodded, understanding that the trip had been a catalyst, but the real transformation had been internal. I'd learned to value my own judgment over others' assumptions, to believe in my capabilities, and to pursue what I wanted without waiting for permission or validation. The external changes, the promotion, the improved friendships, the new experiences, all flowed from that internal shift. My growing confidence extended beyond work and social situations into every aspect of life. I started pursuing other goals I'd been putting off, signing up for an advanced design course, beginning a personal art project I'd been daydreaming about for years, even considering moving to a better apartment now that I could afford it. Each small step reinforced the lesson from Aspen. I was capable of more than I'd been allowing myself to believe. The limitations I'd accepted weren't based on reality, but on internalized messages from people who'd underestimated me, including sometimes myself. Tasha and I had several deep conversations during this period about ambition, self-worth, and the difference between genuine confidence and the performative version she'd been displaying for years. "I've been so busy trying to prove I'm successful that I forgot to actually become the person I wanted to be," she reflected during one coffee date. "You were quietly building the life you wanted while I was loudly announcing mine. I see now which approach was more authentic." Our friendship had found a new equilibrium, one where we supported rather than compared, where we celebrated each other's wins without making them competitions. The change wasn't always comfortable, but it was real and valuable. 6 months after my Aspen trip, Tasha invited me to dinner with genuine excitement in her voice. "I need to tell you something," she said as soon as we sat down. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos from her Peru hiking trip. The images were stunning, but what struck me most was her expression in them. She looked strong, dirty, genuinely joyful in a way I'd rarely seen. "This trip changed my life," she said, her eyes bright. "Hiking for days with just a backpack, no luxury, no performance, just me and the mountains. I felt more alive than I have in years. And it was directly inspired by watching you go after what you wanted." She talked about the trek, the challenges, the moments of doubt, and the incredible satisfaction of summiting the final peak. "I get it now," she said. "What you felt in Aspen. This accomplishment means more than any expensive vacation ever has because I worked for it, planned it, pushed through difficulty to achieve it." I felt genuinely proud of her, recognizing the courage it took to step outside her comfort zone and pursue something challenging. Our journeys had been different, but both had led to authentic growth and self-discovery. The server arrived to take our order, and Tasha ordered thoughtfully rather than selecting the most expensive items like she used to. Small signs of change, but meaningful ones. 3 weeks after our dinner, I received an unexpected email at work. A design firm in Barcelona was looking for experienced designers for a 1-year contract position, and a former colleague had recommended me. The opportunity was incredible, a chance to work internationally, experience a new culture, and significantly expand my professional portfolio. But it was also terrifying, requiring me to leave everything familiar behind. I stared at the email for hours, alternating between excitement and fear. This was exactly the kind of opportunity one would have immediately dismissed before Aspen, assuming it was beyond my capabilities or too risky to attempt. But I wasn't that person anymore. I called Tasha that evening, needing to talk through the decision with someone who would understand. She answered on the first ring, and I explained the situation, my voice revealing my nervousness. "This is amazing," she practically shouted. "You have to do it. This is your Aspen times 100. Her enthusiasm surprised me given how she might have reacted before our respective trips. "But what if I fail? What if I can't handle it?" I asked, voicing the fears that had been circling in my head. "Then you come home having tried something incredible," she replied. "But honestly, Mia, I don't think you'll fail. You proved you can do hard things when you planned that ski trip on a tight budget. This is just the next adventure." Her confidence in me helped tip the scales. I responded to the Barcelona firm's email, expressing interest and requesting more details. Over the next few weeks, I went through interviews, negotiations, and the complex logistics of preparing for an international move. The process was intense, but I approached it with the same methodical planning I'd used for Aspen, researching thoroughly, budgeting carefully, and breaking overwhelming tasks into manageable steps. My promotion at work had come with enough of a raise that I'd built up a solid financial cushion, money that could support me during the transition. I gave notice at my current job, found a tenant for my apartment, and began the emotional process of preparing to leave. Friends threw me a going-away party, and the event felt like a celebration of how much I'd grown over the past year. Tasha gave a toast that made me tear up. A year ago, I told Mia she couldn't afford a ski vacation. I was wrong then, and I've been learning from that mistake ever since. "Mia, you've taught all of us that the only real limitations are the ones we accept. Barcelona is lucky to have you." The party reminded me that I'd built a community of genuine friendships, people who celebrated my success rather than feeling threatened by it. These connections would continue regardless of physical distance. Standing in the airport terminal 3 weeks later, my suitcases packed for a year abroad, I reflected on the journey that had started with a single dismissive comment at a dinner party. Tasha had driven me to the airport, and we'd spent the ride reminiscing about how much had changed. "Remember when I told you that you couldn't afford Aspen?" she said as we pulled into departures. I think about that moment a lot. It was such a small comment, but it revealed so much about how I was living, judging everything by money and surface appearances. It hurt at the time, I admitted. But it also pushed me to prove something to myself. Not to you, but to me. That I was capable of more than I'd been allowing myself to pursue. She hugged me tightly at the curb. "You've inspired real change in me, in how I approach life and relationships. Thank you for being patient with my growth." Walking through security and toward my gate, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path that had led here. A seemingly negative moment had catalyzed incredible personal growth, not just for me, but for people around me. Barcelona awaited, a new adventure built on the confidence I discovered on a Colorado mountain. The only limits I faced were the ones I chose to accept, and I was done accepting limitations based on others' assumptions. My first months in Barcelona were challenging in ways I'd anticipated, and some I hadn't. The language barrier was harder than I'd expected, and professional expectations differed from what I was used to. But I approached each challenge with the same determination I'd brought to learning to ski, breaking problems into manageable pieces and celebrating small victories. The design firm was impressed by my work, and my confidence in presenting ideas continued growing. I made friends with colleagues from around the world, each bringing their own perspectives and experiences. The international environment reminded me daily that my previous life's limitations had been largely self-imposed. When Christmas approached, I treated myself to a ski trip in the Pyrenees, a much smaller resort than Aspen but equally beautiful. Skiing down those Spanish mountains, I thought about how far I'd come since my first terrifying runs in Colorado. I wasn't just more skilled physically, but fundamentally changed in how I approach life and challenges. Tasha and I maintained regular video calls, updating each other on our respective journeys. She'd continued pursuing meaningful experiences over expensive displays, recently completing a meditation retreat that she described as transformative. Our friendship had evolved into something deeper and more authentic than it had been during our early years of knowing each other. One evening, sitting in a Barcelona cafe with my laptop, I started writing about my journey. What began as personal reflection evolved into an essay about the power of believing in yourself despite others' assumptions. I wrote about Tasha's comment, my secret planning, the triumph of actually going to Aspen, and how that single trip had catalyzed a complete life transformation. I wrote about friendship, growth, and the courage it takes to pursue dreams when people around you suggest they're unrealistic. I posted the essay on a personal blog I'd started, not expecting much response. But within days, the post had been shared hundreds of times. People commented with their own stories of being underestimated, of proving doubters wrong, of discovering their own strength through pursuing seemingly impossible goals. Your story reminded me that I'm capable of more than I've been allowing myself to attempt, one comment read. Thank you for sharing this. Another person wrote, I've been putting off my dream of starting a business because friends told me I couldn't afford it. Your essay made me realize I need to try anyway. The response was overwhelming and humbling. My personal journey had resonated with people I'd never met, inspiring them to reconsider their own limitations and possibilities. What started with a hurtful comment at a dinner party had become a message of empowerment reaching strangers across the internet. As my year in Barcelona progressed, I continued growing both professionally and personally. The design firm offered to extend my contract, impressed by my work and my ability to adapt to international collaboration. I accepted, excited to continue this adventure I'd been brave enough to pursue. Tasha visited me in spring, spending a week exploring Barcelona and reconnecting in person. We talked endlessly about how much our lives had changed since that dinner party where everything started. You know what's funny? She said as we sat watching the sunset over the Mediterranean. If I hadn't made that stupid comment about you not affording Aspen, none of this might have happened. You might not have been pushed to prove yourself, might not have discovered this strength, might not be living in Spain right now. I considered that. Maybe. Or maybe I would have gotten here eventually through a different path. I think I was ready to change, and your comment just provided the catalyst. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm grateful it worked out this way, even though I'm not proud of my past behavior. Our friendship is so much better now, built on actual respect rather than superficial hierarchy. Our week together felt like a celebration not just of our individual growth, but of how our friendship had evolved into something real and valuable. On my last evening in Barcelona before returning home for a visit, I sat on my apartment balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from that humiliating dinner party comment to standing on an Aspen ski slope to living and working in Europe. The path hadn't been about proving Tasha wrong, though that had been a satisfying side effect. It had been about discovering my own strength, learning to trust my capabilities, and refusing to let others' limitations become my own. I pulled out my phone and opened social media, scrolling through photos from the past year, skiing in Aspen and the Pyrenees, exploring Barcelona's architecture, celebrating work successes, sharing meals with international friends. These images represented more than just experiences. They represented a fundamental shift in how I saw myself and what I believed I deserved. I composed a final post for my followers, many of whom had been following my journey since the viral essay. A year ago, someone told me I couldn't afford my dreams. Today, I'm living proof that the only real limits are the ones we accept. Whether it's a ski trip, a career change, or moving abroad, don't let anyone else's assumptions define what's possible for you. Believe in yourself. plan carefully, and pursue what makes you come alive. The world is bigger than anyone else's small thinking. The post went live, and I set down my phone, breathing in the Barcelona evening air. My story had come full circle, from doubt to determination to triumph to inspiration. And this was just the beginning.